the thousands inspiring children and working through youth to make a difference for the environment. So we want to hear what you have for us. Are we ready? Come on, show us. An announcement. Somebody left their phone at the reception. Please, if it is yours, you'll find it right at the registration table. You'll have to have the password to open it for us to know it's yours. But we trust you all anyway. Yeah. Thank you. Hello once again, and again I welcome you all to today's public talk. Please take your seats. We will be starting in under 1 minute. Please take your seats. We'll be starting Dr. Goodall together with the Minister of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, and the delegation will be sitting shortly. We'll kindly request you to take your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Dr. Jane Goodall. Alongside that, she's with the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, together with the Board Chair of Uganda Wildlife Authority, Dr. Panta Kasoma, the Executive Director of Uganda Wildlife Authority, the Executive Director of the Jane Goodall Institute, Her Excellency, Ms. Katja Kashbaumer from the Austrian Development Agency and the Austrian government, the Executive Director of the Chimpanzee Trust, the Executive Director of the Wildlife Conservation Society and the Uganda Wildlife Education Center. You're all welcome, and we will be giving a chance for everybody to have a word. We will be starting shortly. I invite Okay, please take your seats. So before we begin today's program, as usual, we will start with the Uganda National Anthem, followed by the East African Anthem, and then we will dive right into this exciting prospective day that we're all looking forward to. So I kindly ask that you stand up, and we start with the National Anthem. The DJ, please guide us. Not that I can't sing it, but I prefer that it resonates from the speakers. That's my excuse for today. Thank you. Please take your seats. Very, very welcome. Yeah, the Roots and Shoots group is here. They've been itching to say something. They want their voices to be heard. Inspired young children that are carrying the burden of the future. The future that we, the older ones, are bequeathing to them, giving back to them. They're inspired to make a difference for animals, people, and the environment. Like I mentioned earlier, there are several groups worldwide in over 69 countries. In Uganda, they are sprouting and expanding very fast in over 129 schools as we speak right now. And today we have St. Teresa Primary School here with us. Am I right, St. Teresa? Yes. We're excited, yes. Looking forward. What do you have to say to us today?
Together we can.
Together we will. We must change the world. Yes. Yeah. One more time. Together we can. Together we will. We must change the world. You can hear the passion in their voices. And that's the passion we hope we'll carry today in today's talk. I think you have an anthem for us, right? Let's hear it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes.
Roots and shoots. Roots and shoots. Roots and shoots.
That's the power of Roots and Shoots. Not even my voice can keep them quiet. Thank you very, very much. Please take your seats. We will give you another chance to speak. Without wasting too much time, I'd like to invite the Executive Director of the Jane Goodall Institute to give us an insight and overview. We will then invite the Honorable Minister before we hear from Dr. Jane Goodall. Mr. James Byamukama.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies, Honorable Minister, Jane, and the entire Jane Goodall family, ambassadors, Your Excellencies here present, very many distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's quite a great honor, Honorable Minister, to host Jane. And if you looked on your side, when the Roots and Shoots were singing and their anthem, then you should, each one of you who had seen him, you should have really known where her roots are and where her hope is. Her roots are in these children, and her hope is in these children taking care of their own environment, but all of us making sure that these children have their future and for their great-grandchildren. Therefore, at Jane Goodall Institute, it's all inspiring hope through action. And the hope of Jane Goodall Institute is just rooted in these young ones. These are just but representative of the entire Roots and Shoots program. So at Jane Goodall Institute, we are 27 chapters in the whole country, Uganda, in the whole world. Uganda is but one. And we have over a presence of about 70 other countries where the Roots and Shoots are. And that is part of the Jane's vision that she has had in her journey since 1960, when she came down to Africa in Gombe to work together with Dr. Rike and find out more about the chimpanzees. Dr. Jane, after about 3 months of being in the wilderness with the chimpanzees eluding her, she was able to get a friend, the gray-beard David. And this broke the ceiling. With the gray-beard David and other chimps, Jane was able to break the record of bringing the world, entire world, and for the first time, to know that it's not the exception of man, the Homo sapiens, that has the knowledge and understanding of using tools. The chimpanzees could also do. That was a great breakthrough, that the chimpanzees have emotions and feelings as we are. So no wonder they are our greatest, nearest cousins in this world in which we live. So Jane, from that story in 1977, started the Jane Goodall Institute that has grown to that extent that we are talking about. In 1991, on realization, she will tell her story that the world was moving in a direction where we, the old ones, we are living and minding our own affairs. But the children of the world were getting desperate and hopeless. So she started with a team of 12 to build the bridge of hope. Yesterday, we were at a point with the first family, and she made this statement, and allow me to go to Jane. You talked of your age, or you say to yourself. She said, but even now, at my own age, when one would be saying, oh, what are you doing? Jane is more encouraged that in her last part of her life, she's more encouraged and moving very fast, that she brings her message to the world that we must change the world and make it a better place, not only for us, but for our children and great-grandchildren. At Jane Goodall Institute, Uganda, many of us may be thinking Jane Goodall is about chimpanzees. And where I go, they say, here are the chimpanzee. I believe Dr. Kasoma, who was here as ED of Jane Goodall Institute for over 8 years, they may be calling him the father of chimpanzees. Honorable Minister, Your Excellencies and delegates here present, at Jane Goodall Institute, we are a people-centered organization. And we envisage to impact the well-being of Ugandans. And you all know that Uganda has over a very big percentage of the people living on nature. So with that, we believe that underlying thing we need to do is to have our natural ecosystems produce much more for us to do. So for our natural systems to do so, then we look at the chimpanzees. The chimpanzees live in nature in their own. They don't have houses anywhere other than in Ngamba. You will only find them in houses in Ngamba. It's a very exception. We talk about the story tomorrow of Ngamba. But they live in the forest, and forest is their home. Therefore, we target the conservation of chimpanzees with their habitat such that this habitat, the forests, are able to produce the ecosystem services that will make us live that well-being that we are desiring for. Therefore, we have Jane here, Honorable Minister, to inspire us to be more accountable to our nature that provides for us such that we may live in prosperity. I wish you, Jane, a good, pleasant time and all your guests, and allow me, it's not my day, once again to welcome you and say it's a great pleasure to have all of you, but particularly my roots and shoots. I am a last born, I always talk about that. I will never stop being a baby like you. So I'll have a time to come and visit you, and we sing and dance the roots and shoots. May the good Lord bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director of the Jane Goodall Institute. But like I mentioned earlier, we are a big partnership. I would like to recognize our partners, the Chimp Trust, the Wildlife Conservation Society, the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, the Ministry of Water and Environment, Uganda Wildlife Authority, National Forestry Authority, who are the lead government agencies, together with the Uganda Wildlife Education Center, Wildlife Clubs of Uganda, Uganda Biodiversity Fund. We're a very big team that has put this together, and I'd like to recognize you all and put together a hand clap for you. The Chimp Trust specifically is celebrating 25 years this year, and we're looking forward to that. Please look around your inboxes. You never know, you may have been invited. If you haven't, well, you can get crushed by visiting Ngamba Island on your own. You'll always be welcome. Thank you. I would now like to invite the Honorable Minister to make his remarks. Honorable Tom Butime, Minister of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities. Before we hear from Dr. Jane Goodall. You're welcome, Honorable Minister.
Honorable members of Parliament, Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, Dr. Jane Goodall, the Jane Goodall family, development partners, board members and executive directors of allied institutions, members of the private sector, members from the academia, representatives of conservation non-government organizations, environmentalists. Oh, the school children have just walked out of the school children remaining. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to Kampala at the Sheraton to attend a public lecture on the topic Partnerships for coexistence, the emerging high levels of deforestation in major chimpanzee habitats occasioned by extensive commercial development. This public lecture is timely as it comes at a time when there are so many infrastructure development projects as well as extraction of minerals and other under-surface resources being undertaken in the Albertine Graben, which is the key habitat for chimps. This topic may as well be discussed today. There is an opportunity for us to compare notes again and focus on our future and what we can bequeath generations to come. As you all know, planet Earth is a magnificent web of life, woven together by the delicate threads of ecosystems and species that call it home. For this web to sustain all the forms of life on planet Earth, it is important to have the ecosystems and the species balanced and healthy. It is, however, very disturbing to note that the health and balance of planet Earth is under immense threat due to emerging challenge of deforestation driven by existence and commercial development. Please read Local Voices, Local Choices. Take care. The Gombe Experience. The Tanganyika Catchment Reforestation Program. And you will really understand what other areas, what we can study, what we can copy from those experiences. Today we stand at crossroads, witnessing the reality of deforestation unfolding before our eyes, with major chimpanzee habitats being ravaged by the forces of human progress. The loss of the critical habitats not only threatens the survival of our chimpanzee counterparts, but also disrupts the delicate balance of our shared ecosystems. The expanding footprint of commercial development casts a shadow of uncertainty over the future of these remarkable creatures and the rich biodiversity they inhabit. I'm a member of parliament for Mwenge Central County, Kenjojo District. And that is part of Kibale National Park. Fort Poto, you have got to go through my constituency, a very beautiful constituency with a lot of tea before you reach Kibale National Park Forest. And that is the home. That is the primate capital of chimpanzees in the entire world. So I'm here, a very proud member of parliament, because part of my constituency hosts the largest number of chimpanzees on Earth. That's Kibale National Park. However, in the face of this challenge, the theme partnerships for coexistence takes on profound significance. Today, we are privileged to have Dr. Jane Goodall, a world-renowned ethologist, a pioneer in the field of conservation, founder of the John Goodall Institute, and the Chimpanzee Sanctuary and Wildlife Conservation Trust, now Chimpanzee Trust. Her groundbreaking work with chimpanzees has not only expanded our understanding of the animal kingdom, but has also ignited a global movement for conservation and coexistence. Let me welcome Jane Goodall to Uganda and Kampala with all those making her entourage, those who have come with her. I welcome all invited guests to this public lecture. I welcome all tourists and ministers. Extend my gratitude to all panelists and participants who are here to contribute their insights and knowledge. I thank the organizers, the ministries of tourism, wildlife, very soon, wildlife and heritage, and water and environment. Finally, let the lecture begin. Thank you very much for your attention.
Working. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. All of us in this room are primates. All of us. And our closest living relative in the world today is the chimpanzee. And it's wonderful to be here on the 25th anniversary of Ngamba Island, because I was here at the very beginning. So, as I say, we're all fellow primates, and I greet all of you as fellow primates with a call that you hear if you go to Ngamba Island or one of the places in Uganda where there are still wild chimpanzees. Come on. Not a very good reply, but it'll do. So I believe I'm right, there's supposed to be a little video now, which is sort of introducing us this afternoon, or am I wrong? I don't need it. Is it coming? Yeah, okay. It's very short, it's only 1 minute, but it kind of puts everything in perspective. And in 1960, a young British woman ventured into the forests of Africa to follow her childhood dream. No. It's been an amazing journey, this life of mine. No, I don't want this one. This planet has filled me with the wonder. Sorry everybody, but this is going to repeat what I'm about to say. And you can see it afterwards if you want to, we'll share it with you. Because I want to go back to the beginning. How did a little girl born to a poor family in England, as it was then, we didn't have a United Kingdom, come to be traveling around the world as I am. It's a very strange story for me. And I was born loving animals. I was just born that way. I don't know what sparked my interest. It just came with me into the world. And I was lucky in having a really supportive mother. And she helped me find books about animals. When I was growing up, I was born 90 years ago, there was no television. It hadn't been invented. So I learned about animals through books and being out in nature. As I say, we didn't have much money, but my grandmother had a lovely house. And when war broke out, we went to live there, me, my sister, my mother. And I spent hours and hours in the garden. I climbed the trees. I felt close to the birds. And learning, watching, almost every photograph you see of me when I was young, I'm with some kind of animal. When I was 4 years old, Mum took me to a farm in the country, a proper farm where animals graze in the fields, not one of these terrible factory farms. And I was given a job of collecting the hens' eggs. So, you know, there were about 6 little hen houses where they slept at night with nest boxes around the edge. And I would go with my little basket and put the eggs in it. But apparently, I began asking everybody, where is the hole on the hen for the egg to come out? Because I couldn't see such a hole. And nobody told me. So what I remember vividly is this hen. She was going into one of the hen houses. And I thought, she's going to lay an egg. And crawled after her. Big mistake. Squawks of fear, she flew out. So in that little 4-year-old mind, I must have thought, well, now the hens think this is a dangerous place. They won't come in here. But I'm on the path of discovery. I'm going to find out where the egg comes out of the hen. So I went into an empty hen house. And apparently I was gone for over 4 hours. And it was getting late, and nobody knew where I was. And my mother had actually called the police when this excited little girl came rushing towards the house, all covered in straw. And I had actually seen a hen lay an egg. And I don't know who was more excited, me or the hen. So anyway, that was my first exploration into the world of animal behavior. And I tell that story because that was the making of a little scientist. Curiosity, asking questions, making a mistake, not giving up, and learning patience. It was all there, and a different kind of mother might have crushed that early fascination, that early beginnings of a scientific career. And I might not be here now. So I was good at school, but there was no money for university. I had to get a job. I did a boring old secretarial training. I had a job in London. And then came the opportunity. My mother had advised me to always follow every opportunity that came. Because when I first said at 10 years old, I'm going to go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them, everybody laughed at me. How will you do that? You don't have money. Africa's far away, and you're just a girl. It was my mother who said, just remember that if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and if you don't give up, hopefully you find a way. And that's a message I take around the world, especially to people in disadvantaged communities. And I can't tell you how many have said, Jane, I want to thank you because you taught me, because you did it, I can do it too. And I wish Mum was alive to know how her message to me has changed many lives. Anyway, yes. I'm sure she's listening up there somewhere, so thank you, Mum. So I was working in London, boring old job, and I get a letter from a school friend whose parents had moved to Kenya, inviting me for a holiday opportunity. Had to get the money, went home, worked as a waitress for about 5 months, and eventually had enough money to go to Africa. Return fare I had to have. we didn't go by plane in those days. There were some flying, but they were terribly expensive. Went by boat. And of course, from London to go to Mombasa in Kenya, you should go through the Suez Canal. It takes about, I don't know, just nearly 2 weeks. But the Suez Canal was closed because Britain and Egypt had some kind of silly little war. So our boat went all the way around down to South Africa and up. And the first place I set foot on African soil was Cape Town. And it was really exciting. There was the iconic Table Mountain, and there were Africans dressed in their national costume. But then I began to notice on the doors into the hotels, all over the place, there were these words in Afrikaans, Slechts Blanc. I said, what do these words mean? White people only. I didn't grow up like that. My grandfather was a congregational minister. We didn't judge people by the color of their skin, but as human beings. And I couldn't wait to leave South Africa then. It was 2 days the ship was in dock. And when I got to Kenya, it was better. It was just on the very eve of independence from British colonial rule. So the atmosphere was totally different. And I stayed with my friend, and then I heard about a man called Dr. Louis Leakey, famous paleontologist, anthropologist. And somebody said, Jane, if you're interested in animals, you should go and see Louis Leakey. So I went to see him at the Corindon Museum. It's now the National Museum of Kenya. And he must have seen something in me. He took me around, he asked me all sorts of questions. And because I'd read everything I possibly could about animals in Africa, and there wasn't much back then, and because I'd spent hours in the Natural History Museum in London, I could answer most of his questions. Anyway, he gave me a job as his secretary. His secretary had left just 2 weeks before I met him. That was obviously meant to be. And so now I'm in a world where everybody around me can answer my questions about the animals and the plants of East Africa. And he actually took me on one of his annual 3-month digs to Olduvai Gorge. It was before any early human had been found there, and all the animals were there. And I loved that every one of the big 5 I first met on foot. A lion in Olduvai that followed for about, I don't know, twice the length of this room. I think he was a young male, he was curious. And another time, it was a rhino. Rhino was as far away as the end of that room, knew there was something there. It was me and the other young girl, Gillian. And he went back and forth with his tail up, making little pff sounds. And then luckily he ran off in the other direction. So this was exciting. And I think it was because of how I reacted to these 2 meetings. Louis said I behaved exactly right. That he asked me one day if I would be prepared to go and study a group of chimps, to be the first person to find out about their behavior in the wild. Wow. Of course. Yes, yes, yes. Well, first he had to get money. That took about a year because, I hadn't been to college. I was just out from England. And for that year, I went back home and continued to learn everything I could. And then Tanganyika back then, was still part of the British Protectorate. And the authorities said, a young girl on her own in the forest, unheard of. No, she can't come. In the end, they gave in and said, but she can't come alone. So who volunteered to come with me? For the first 4 months of my 6 months money allowance, it was my mother, that same amazing mother. And again, she provided support because for 4 whole months, the chimpanzees took one look at me and ran away. And I knew with time I could get their trust, but did I have time? I had only 6 months. And I knew if I didn't find something exciting, then that money would come to an end, the dream would end, I would let Louis Leakey down. Well, it was my mother who gave me this moral boost. Jane, you found that peak, and from there you're learning about the different calls the chimpanzees make. You're learning how they bend branches over to make nests at night. You see how they move around, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups, sometimes a mother with just her children, and occasionally many groups joining together when a different food becomes available with lots of noise and excitement. You're learning more than you think. So it was really sad that it was just 2 weeks after she had to leave that the breakthrough came, when the one chimpanzee who'd begun to allow me to get close was David Greybeard, I named him. He had a lovely white hair on his chin. And I saw him pick grasses. I saw him push one down into the hole in a termite mound, carefully pull it out and eat off the termites with his lips. I saw him break off leafy twigs, and to use those as tools to fish for termites, he had to carefully remove the leaves. So I was seeing a chimpanzee using and making tools. So why was that exciting? It wouldn't be today. But back then, science believed humans and only humans use and make tools. In fact, they defined us as man, the tool maker. So this was the observation which excited everyone. And this was the observation that enabled Leakey to get the National Geographic Society interested. So they said, okay, we'll go on funding this research after the 6 months grant runs out. So now I could relax. And I began to learn more and more about the chimpanzees, how each one is as different from each other as we are from each other. I learned about their communication. It's the same as ours. Kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, begging for food with hand outstretched. Males competing for dominance, swaggering, looking as dangerous as they possibly can, shaking their fists. Remind you of a few male politicians today? So anyway, I watched with great delight the way the mother and her family interact together. And there's a long childhood, 5 years, the youngster suckles, although less frequently, rides on her back, though less frequently, and shares her nest at night until the next baby is born. Unlike us, chimps don't overpopulate their forest. They only have one child every 5 years, and there's a fairly high infant mortality. I watched how the males patrol the boundaries of their territory. They're very territorial. And I learned, to my shock, that just like us, chimps have a very dark and brutal side to their nature. They're capable of a kind of primitive war. They can kill each other in gang attacks, males of one community against an individual of another. I learned too that just like us, they have a compassionate and truly altruistic side. They help each other, mostly within a family, but sometimes when a mother dies, a totally unrelated individual, a male, may adopt a motherless orphan. So clearly they were so like us in so many ways. Biologically, we share 98.6% of the composition of our DNA with them, and there are many other biological similarities. And then, of course, those that I've described with their behavior. At this point, Leakey wrote me a letter and said, Jane, I now want you to get a degree. I want other scientists to take you seriously. Because, of course, they weren't really. I mean, I was just a girl. Why should they believe tool using or anything else? And so he got me a place in Cambridge University to do not an undergraduate degree. He said, we've got no time for that. It was a PhD in ethology. I didn't even know what ethology was, a study of behavior. There was no Googling in those days. So I arrived feeling nervous, and imagine how I felt to be told I'd done everything wrong. You shouldn't have named the chimpanzees. David Greybeard, Flo, Fifi, Melissa, Gremlin, Mr. McGregor, and so on. You can't talk about their personalities, though they're as vivid as ours. You can't talk about them having minds capable of solving problems, and you certainly can't talk about them having emotions like happiness, despair, anger, and so on. Why? Because those are all unique to humans. Well, fortunately, when I was a child, I had a wonderful teacher. And he had taught me that in this respect, those erudite professors were completely, absolutely wrong. That teacher was my dog, Rusty. You can't share your life with a dog, a cat, a cow, pig, a horse, any animal, any bird, and not know that we are not the only beings with personalities, minds, and emotions. We are part of, and not, as I was taught at Cambridge, separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. And it's been fascinating to see how every time chimpanzees are shown to have one other attribute that was thought unique to humans, the scientists would come up with another thing that divided us from chimpanzees and other animals. But eventually, partly because the Geographic sent a filmmaker, Hugo van Lawick, the father of my grandchildren, my son and my grandchildren, I'm sorry, the father of my son. And, and so they gradually came to accept. I didn't tackle them. I just went on writing about the chimpanzees as they are. I got my PhD. I went back. I set up a tiny research station. Gombe National Park is very small. And they were the best days of my life. I could be out in the rainforest alone. I could be part of the natural world on which we all depend for food, for everything else. And why did I leave? I could have stayed. There was money coming in. We're still in, after 62 years, we're still learning about those chimps, my research team there. I left in 1986. I went to this conference in America that I helped to put together. By then there were 6 other study sites across Africa. And we brought these chimpanzee researchers together. And it was mainly to see the extent to which they have different cultures, which is, we did discover that they do indeed have culture. But we had a session on conservation. And it was shocking to see right across Africa, wherever the people were studying chimpanzees, forests were being cut down and chimpanzee numbers were dropping. I went to that conference as a scientist. I left as an activist. It was rather like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. I don't know, people say it must have been a hard decision. I didn't make it. It just happened. I left as an activist. I didn't know what to do. So I managed to get some money together. I thought I'll try and find out more about why the chimp numbers are decreasing and why the forests are being cut down. And so I got enough money to visit these other study sites. And the first place I came to was Uganda. And we set up, with the help of the British Council, the first Wildlife Awareness Week. And you know something? That was the very first time that different people engaged in studying animals or the forest had come together. They didn't know what each other was doing. It was a very successful week, opened by, I think it was the First Lady back then. And that started Wildlife Awareness Weeks in other parts of Africa where there are chimpanzees. So I was beginning to learn in Uganda first, and then the various other countries, a lot more about the problems faced by the chimpanzees, mainly loss of habitat, but also hunting, killing mothers to steal babies for the wildlife trade, and the bushmeat hunting, being caught in snares and so forth. But I was also learning about the plight of so many African people living in and around chimpanzee habitat, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education, the degradation of the land from over-farming, the penetration further into the wildlife habitat. And it came to a head when I flew over the tiny Gombe National Park. And when I arrived in 1960, it was part of the great equatorial forest belt that went over to West Africa. By the late 1980s, when I flew over, I knew there was deforestation, but I wasn't prepared for the shock of seeing a tiny island of forest surrounded by bare hills. There were more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, struggling to survive. And that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, we can't save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And so we began the program, started Take Care, Tokari we call it, the Jane Goodall Institute method of community-led conservation. That's the book that the minister was talking about, that he has in front of him. And I began in a small way with the 12 villages around the Gombe National Park. And it wasn't a bunch of arrogant white people going into a poor African village and telling them what to do to improve their lives. No, it was a group of local people. We didn't even have a PhD among them. They just worked with NGOs in forestry, agriculture, health, and so on. And they went into the villages and they listened to the people. What can we do to make your lives better? Well, grow more food. That meant restoring fertility to the overused land without pesticides and artificial fertilizers. And then we want better health and education. And we started working with the local Tanzanian authorities to improve the schools and in some cases to build clinics. And we began reaching out to people for donations so that we could do more. And Tokari turned out to be a very holistic program, starting, as I've said, moving on to water management programs, reforestation, agroforestry, getting as many scholarships as we could and can to give girls a chance of secondary education. When I began, it was very rare for a girl to actually get into secondary education. And we provided microfinance opportunities so villagers could start their own environmentally sustainable businesses. And also family planning, very well received. When I began at Gombe, a woman on average had 8 to 10 to 12 children. They couldn't afford to educate them anymore. And so they were really pleased to find out ways that they could space the family in a reasonable way. That program has been so successful. We've added sophisticated technology, GIS, GPS, satellite imagery. We've helped the villagers raise the money to make village land use management plans. We're beginning to use this technology to survey other areas where there are chimpanzees, including Uganda. And so the people now understand that protecting the environment isn't just for wildlife. I think that was why we were so successful. At the beginning, for at least the first 4 years, we didn't even talk to them about wildlife, but just about improving their own lives. And then they began to understand that saving the environment is also saving the future for their children and grandchildren and all future generations. So that program is now not only Tanzania, Uganda, but 4 other African countries. And it's growing and it's spreading, and hopefully we can get this book out. It's the story of Tokari, and what makes it special is it's stories from the people who've been affected by Tokari. Well, by this time I'm going around the world trying to raise awareness, obviously hoping to raise funds for all these programs growing around Africa. And I was meeting back in as long ago as the 80s, I was meeting young people, high school students, university students, older ones, who were already losing hope. They were mostly just apathetic, not seeming to care about anything. Some were angry, some were depressed. And this was everywhere. And when I asked them, why are you feeling like this? They said, well, you've compromised our future, and there's nothing we can do about it. So are we compromising? Have we compromised the future of these young people? We have compromised your future. In fact, we've been stealing your future, probably since the Industrial Revolution. But as you know, it's not too late. We've got this window of time when, if we get together, then we've got time to at least slow down climate change and slow down loss of biodiversity and do something about pollution and change from industrial farming, particularly industrial animal farming, into more environmentally forms of growing food, which actually do better, like restorative agriculture, permaculture, and so on. So this led to Roots and Shoots. Roots and Shoots, when 12 high school students in Dar es Salaam came to me, and they were concerned about so many things going on around them, not just environmental. Why wasn't anybody doing more to help the homeless orphans who were on the street sniffing glue? And why wasn't anybody doing anything about people languishing in hospitals with nobody to visit them? And yes, they were worried about the environment, they were worried about poaching, they were worried about so many things. And so I told them, go and get your friends, and we had a meeting, and Roots and Shoots was born, February 1991. And because I'd learned how in the rainforest everything is interconnected, every species of animal and plant has a role to play and is important in that ecosystem, we decided each group of Roots and Shoots would for themselves choose 3 projects which they would take action on between them. One would choose something to help people, and others would choose to help animals, and others would choose to help the environment. Or they could do one big project that brings everything together. So what began with these 12 high school students is now in almost 70 countries. By now it may be 70, it's growing so fast. And it's in, as I say, it's in nearly 70 countries, hundreds of thousands of groups. And it's imparting in young people values of respect, respect for each other, respect for other life forms, respect for animals, respect for the environment, and understanding that trees are these amazing beings that communicate under the soil and can share information with each other. Stuff that's coming up all the time, we're learning more and more about the millions of little creatures living in the soil on which we depend for growing our crops. And because of industrial agriculture and deforestation, the soil is being swept away, and the chemicals used in industrial agriculture are killing the organisms in the soil that's left. So these young people are learning ways in which they can, and they will, because we must, save the world. And I've got a little video. It was taken some time ago. This is the second video. I'm sorry about the muddle with the first, but the second video was taken 10 years ago. It needs updating, but it gives you an idea of Roots and Shoots around the world. And we depend a lot on play acting, we depend on art, and it's a program that involves everybody, not just those interested in the environment, but everybody. So if you can manage to find that little video.
You are the reason we found ours, so thank you, stars. Some people think it's far away, some know it's with them every day. You are the reason we found ours, so thank you, stars. There are no words that can blow it away on the air. When they try to blow it away is when you know it will always be there. To some it's the strength to be apart.
Hello.
To some it's a feeling in the heart. And when you're out there on your own, it's the way back home.
So I hope we can arrange for these children to see that, because they really can't see back there. And it's really for you guys. So we'll show it to you separately, okay? I won't be here, but somebody will. James, you will organize that, right? Okay, so we are living in dark times. You all know what's happening to the environment around the world. There's political and social problems too. And there are so many problems we have to solve, from climate change, loss of biodiversity, alleviating poverty, reducing unsustainable lifestyles, dealing with industrial agriculture, so many problems. There are people trying to solve those problems. Often they're trying to solve them in silos. We need to get together. The problems are too big for any one group to try and solve alone. And people are losing hope because they look around at the problems in the world and they think, well, there's nothing that can be done. And there are scientists who tell us we've reached the tipping point. Well, I believe, as I've said, we have this window of time. And if we get together, and if we take action together, we can make a real difference. And in our individual lives, we can make ethical choices each day. What do we buy? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap because of unfair wages somewhere else? If hundreds and then millions of people make little ethical choices every day, they may feel small, but cumulatively they will make a big difference, which is the main message of Roots and Shoots. So that's my greatest reason for hope. These young people, you saw their energy and their passion. I'm traveling around the world all the time, and this is everywhere. And it's in kindergarten, it's in university. Even adults are now forming Roots and groups, Roots and Shoots, like the staff in a big commercial organization, for example. So these young people are changing the world. As we speak, there are those out there with their sleeves rolled up, taking action. It's all about taking action. And we're growing because we partner with other youth organizations. And that means that the youth community around the world is being connected and understanding that far more important than the color of our skin, our culture, our religion, our language, is the fact we're all human beings. We all cry, we all laugh, we all love, and our blood is the same. But I've got other reasons for hope. There's the resilience of nature. If you fly over Gombe National Park today, you won't see bare hills anymore. The trees have come back. They're still coming back. Some tree planting, yes, but very often it's the seeds that were lying dormant in the soil. And when nature's given a chance, she will revive. The insects come back after the plants, and then the birds, and then the mammals. And so once again, you start building up biodiversity. And as the forests come back, they help, as you heard, to regulate the temperature and the rainfall. They give us shade, clean air, water, and so on. Then animals on the brink of extinction can be given another chance. And this is really important since we're in the midst of the 6th great extinction. And then another reason for hope is the amazing brain that we've been given. It makes us more different from other animals than anything else. Yes, other animals are way, way, way more intelligent than science was prepared to admit. And there's a pig who paints, who's painting self for $5,000, and she's so excited when she's given a paintbrush. There are crows who can solve some complex problems faster than the average 8-year-old human. I could go on and on. And if you haven't seen My Octopus Teacher, find it on Netflix. The octopus has the most amazing intelligence. I could tell so many stories. So fortunately, our brains, which have enabled us to do horrible things like develop nuclear weapons, but science is now moving towards finding solutions of a way that enable us to live in greater harmony with nature, like renewable energy as one example. And then my last reason for hope is what I call the indomitable spirit. People who tackle what seems impossible. And people laugh at them and tell them you'll never do that, but they don't give up, and in the end they so often succeed. And even if they don't succeed, they have people around them who will carry on that message after they're gone. And you have icons like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, but then you have an example. Last week, when I was in Tanzania, I went to a school which deliberately picks out the bright children from the very, very poorest communities. And I went to visit that school, and I met this young girl, and she just graduated from high school. And I was going to shake her hand, but I saw bandages all around her hand, and then I saw there were bandages around both hands. And then I found that she didn't speak. And it turns out she has cerebral palsy. She can't use her hands, but she does the most beautiful paintings with her feet. And she's been accepted into an art college. And I could tell so many stories about these people I meet who do seemingly impossible feats. So those are my reasons for hope. And this indomitable spirit, the last video I want to end with, I won't say anything else after this, shows that animals too have an indomitable spirit. And I think the people who care for the chimpanzees in Ngamba Island understand how some of these chimpanzees who've been orphaned, who've been through terrible trauma, nevertheless have that spirit that enables them to rise up out of that terrible situation and once again enjoy life. So this video was taken of a chimpanzee in the largest chimp sanctuary in Africa, in the Republic of Congo. It's called Chimpunga, and it began, I can't remember how many years ago. It's now got nearly 200 chimpanzees. It's a big responsibility. Chimps can live to be over 60, and we have to care for them for life, unless there's a place where they can be released into the wild. This particular chimpanzee, you may have seen this video before, was a chimpanzee called Wunda, and I'd never met her until this day, and she was being released on one of the large islands the government has given us. And what happened was so amazing. So when you see what happened, do you think the children could come and sort of sit on the floor in front? Because you'd like to see this video, wouldn't you? Come and sit on the floor down here. Only quickly, because otherwise we'll be very late. Come on, hurry, hurry, hurry. Hurry, come on, come on, come on, come on. Quickly, go and sit on the floor. Go and sit on the floor. Or up the aisles, you can, if there's a lot of low room, you can go up the aisles. You'll have to go further along. Come on, don't stop the way. You're holding us up. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Come on, you've all got lots of energy. Be quick. Quick, quick, quick. Quick, quick, quick. Quick, quick, quick. So anyway, when you see what happened, which is, as I say, one of the most amazing things I've seen in my life, try and feel into the atmosphere. It was very quiet. You could hear the sound of rustling leaves and moving water. But it was such a magical moment. So it was so quiet and so intense, and I will never forget it. So if we can have this last video. The chimpanzee is called Wunda. She arrived badly wounded by the bullet that killed her mother, and she was saved by a wonderful veterinarian, Rebecca, who runs the sanctuary. She got ill again when she was about 8 and again nearly died, and again Rebecca saved her. And can you see? Well, you can stand up and see. And try and get to see, because I want you to see this. It's so special. Okay? All right, we can, I think the children are more or less sorted out. Not quite, but I think we can play the video now. This is a really exciting moment for me. The Jane Goodall Institute's Chimpunga Chimpanzee Rehabilitation Center in the Republic of Congo has for years been caring for infants whose mothers were killed, mostly for the illegal bushmeat trade. Many of them are now fully grown. Recently, we acquired 3 large forested islands on the beautiful Kwilu River, where we can release many of the chimpanzees from our overcrowded center. In here is Wunda, and she nearly died, but thanks to Rebecca, she came back from the dead. And here she is about to come out into this paradise. She's the 15th chimpanzee to get her freedom here. And we hope ultimately to have about 60 on the island. Today is the first time I've met Wunda. I talked to her on the boat, trying to reassure her. She must have wondered what was happening. None of us could predict exactly what she would do once the cage door opened. It was a very, very touching moment. One of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me. The warmth of her embrace is something I shall never forget. For Wunda and all the other chimpanzees we're working to bring here, Chinzula Island will provide a wonderful forest home where they will be cared for and safe. So I wanted to end with that amazing experience. And I want to, as a last word, to say thank you to the JGI team and partners, because without them around the world, none of this would be happening. If we hadn't gone to Gombe, there would be no Gombe. All those famous chimps would have vanished long, long ago. And a big thank you to everyone working on Ngamba Island, working to help protect the forests and wildlife of Uganda. That wildlife that tourists come for miles to see and go away inspired and determined to do their bit to help us and to help the children save the future. Thank you all so much for coming. I think, yes, like up here, okay. They can stay there.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. That was something. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now we will have the opportunity, just a glimpse of it, to have a few questions. Yes. I invite our moderator for the day, Miss Susan Mwanga, to come up on stage. And as we reflect, so Ms. Susan Mwanga will take on from here, will take us through a very quick Q&A, and then we'll invite the panelists for us to take a deeper dive. Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I invite the panelists, I am truly touched. I mean, I was listening, but the last video, I think, did it for me. There's not much else one can say. It's almost self-explanatory in terms of the message for change, the message for saving the environment, and the message of relying on the young people to be able to do this. My names are, as you've heard, Nansozi Mwanga. I find myself in an awkward position being here because I'm not really a conservationist, even though I sat on the board of EcoTrust for about 6 years. But I find the message resonates in the things that I do currently. And more importantly, I think it's probably put a fire in my old self to be able to do more beyond today. So I'd like to invite the two panelists to come up on stage. We have the first panelist I'd like to invite is Ms. Jane Cantu Els. The next panelist, Joan. The next panelist is Honorable Flavia Kabahenda. And before we kick off the panel discussion, and before we kick off the question and answer, I'd like to give an opportunity to 3 different entities to be able to say a few words before we get into the actual question and answer session. I'd like to invite the ED of the Uganda Wildlife Authority. I'd like to also invite the ED for Wildlife Conservation Society. And of course, I'd like to invite back the ED for the Jane Goodall Institute. I'd like each one to have about 2 minutes just to reflect and also, of course, to talk to the message that has been given to us this afternoon. Yes.
A good afternoon to you all. Thank you, Jane Goodall, for creating time and coming and for sharing your story with us. Honorable Minister and all invited guests and all people who are here, we do appreciate creating time that you have made, that you are here. The subject that we have is to do with partnerships for conservation. At Uganda Wildlife Authority, our mission is a very long one, but key among it is that we manage the wildlife with neighboring communities for the benefit of all. And that is the short way I could say it. And that managing with neighboring communities and other stakeholders is actually to do with partnerships. The habitat of the chimpanzees, if I will, is a forest. In the forest are trees, are insects, are birds, and other animals. And if those were not working in partnership, if they did not work together to ensure that their habitat is one that is sustainable, then we wouldn't have the chimpanzees, we wouldn't have the other wildlife that is there. Unfortunately, the human being, who is really the most intelligent of all the partners in an ecosystem, is the most destructive too, because we are the ones damaging the habitats, we are the ones killing the wildlife, we are the ones cutting the trees. And so it is important that those of us in this room today appreciate our role if we are going to have the ecosystems and actually our very selves, the humans, survive for generations to come. At Uganda Wildlife Authority, we say that we conserve for generations. That means looking at the future and ensuring that we have a future. I like the fact that Jane Goodall has created the group of young people here, the Roots and Shoots, and I think it is important for all of us to work with her to engage the younger people into conservation. I guess that my 2 minutes are over, so I will ask my brother Simon to continue from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, all protocol observed. I'm Simon Takoze Chibina Mpindo. I work for Wildlife Conservation Society as the country director. I've been privileged to interact with Dr. Jane Goodall for the past, I think now 20 years. I met her the first time in 2004. We had just finished the census of chimpanzees then, together with the Jane Goodall Institute for Uganda, where we established that at least we had 5,000 individuals in the country. And we continue to do that on behalf of Uganda Wildlife Authority. We just concluded the census for most of the prime conservation areas, mainly in Western Uganda. The number seems to be stable, except that the individuals are getting really fragmented because of the agricultural expansion. Now, I like this sharing because it's quite inspirational to us. I'm a wildlife ecologist, but also an ecological economist who really turns this nature into a dollar value so that those who are in the private sector speak to the dollar value. They don't really understand the ecology of a species. But let me say one or two things in response to what Dr. Jane Goodall has presented. Nearly 70 years ago, we spent a lot of time understanding the species themselves, just the stuff that Jane has talked about. Today, our biggest challenge as conservationists is to understand you people in the room, in terms of what choices you make, in terms of what your aspirations you have. And with that, brings a lot of conflicting interests, all right? What we are now advocating for is to learn a bit more about the people behavior. What are those choices that you're making? Do you know what you're eating on the table? Where is it being produced from? How does that compromise the integrity of conservation? Those are very key and pertinent questions to answer. So we are advocating for multi-sectoral approach where we build the connectedness between forestry, agriculture, water, and all those different sectors so that people see that these systems are really connected. The world out there is so complex that if you try to devalue it, you actually lose a lot. And we've been encouraging the government to think holistically. That's the only way we can diffuse tensions among the different forces of nature and also the different institutions. Now, Uganda Wildlife Authority, National Forest Authority are facing an imminent challenge that they are in charge of a large chunk of Uganda's land mass. And with that comes with the competition for other land uses, particularly commercial agriculture. And as I mentioned, politicians, private sector, you understand the dollar value. You don't really pay much attention to the things that Jane has just been articulating to. And that's why we are here to speak for those. The private sector needs to be more involved. You should also understand that your businesses survive because of the maintenance and sustenance of the ecosystems. And we want to encourage you to start thinking about nature as one of those risk mitigation measures. So you should be deliberate to invest in nature and not just giving us lip service in terms of corporate social investment. You should go beyond that and begin to demonstrate that you have a social responsibility. And I think those who care to read about the Wall Street journals, companies are being asked to do more, just not to care about the bottom line, all right? And we can have a separate conversation why it's important that you move beyond the bottom line. Lastly, communities that endure and suffer the losses need to hear our voices. And that means that we should invest in improving the livelihoods of the communities so that they are supportive to conservation. We need to deepen their connectedness to nature. We need to diffuse the colonial aspects where people just think that these protected areas were set aside for a different kind of species that must enjoy them. They must be part of this whole process. There is no free lunch. In other words, everybody must pay their price. Let the polluters pay, and then we'll all benefit from this whole process. I thank you so much.
It's another great honor to be here again. And I want to believe that either some of you have been in the landscape where I work in Uganda. I want to bring the situation right down home here and address ourselves to why these very particular topics that we are talking about. We all know that the majority of our people that live in the countryside live with nature, and that over the years they have learned how to live with nature and really have lived in harmony. Forces have come that at times some of these people have no options. Imagine if you don't have a meal to eat and you see an animal crossing through your way. Possibly likely we say, God have saved me tonight and given me something to eat. So you not have a second thought, but you say, thank you, God, for I have this. I want you to imagine, and I'm talking about realities down into our communities. I want you to imagine that you are a Mchiga like me. You came from Kawale and came to Kagadi as an internal migrant. And then you are down in Kagombe cutting it down. You have a strong maize yield for the next 5 years. You've produced 12 children like Jane was talking about, and soon the productivity has gone down. What do you do with these 12 children? You can't take them to school. You can't feed them. So what happens? You cut the next forest. And this is how our forests have gone. Desperate people in desperate situations. And you know that deforestation in Uganda has been so high. At 1900,000, we are just about 3% forested. I am told, I'm a forest officer, but I've been divested. I don't know the real facts now, but I am told we are about either 12% of the forest, about 8% of the wetlands. And so we've declined that much fast. So the poor people are scratching the earth, and we, the private sector, are looking out for opportunities to bring about development. And so we come into this very particular landscape. As a Ugandan, I love to see this development come. I have children, I have my fathers, I have my cousins. Everybody needs a job. We want to live a better life. So when you come and say, oh no, there is no more, I want to grow more sugarcane, we want to grow more tea, and that's great for this country. But where are you growing it? We already a very big population. There is not so much land left to have such extensive agriculture. So let these poor people sell to you the land and expand. They're excited about the money that you've given them. The next day, the money is finished. What do? The poor people go back to the wetlands, they go back to the forest and cut them down, and the problem goes on. We have other instances where actually the most left land is possibly a wetland, is possibly a forest, and therefore we also take our extensive agricultural interventions into those areas and we bring down the forests. That's why the emerging, we call it emerging high levels. We already had a problem, we already had a wound, and the wound we are adding salt. But we want to know, and I want to bring it as an appeal, that this won't go on for long, because soon we'll all be desperate. These forests we are cutting down, we are cutting our water reservoirs. Soon there will be no more rain. Even when you want to irrigate, the aquifers will be dry, and the people of the private sector, of the middle income like me and you are seated here, because I don't think my poor person from the community is seated here. We'll go to the supermarket, we'll buy food from South Africa, from elsewhere, we'll survive. What is a world in which you live alone and others are dying? That world is a horrible world. And therefore, that's why we think that we need to come together in partnership, such that we live in harmony and we live peaceful. If you want to try out a life of living alone, you go to Luzira, our main prison, and you ask for a cell, and they put you there, and you live there for 1 week. You will come well taught of how it is to live alone. But if you want, turn around yourself and greet your neighbor and see how exciting it is to have another person. You've all been attracted by Jane because you feel there's a story to tell. And therefore, my appeal is, and I want to bring this again back home, that we need to live together. At Jane Goodall Institute, we are trying to put up a permaculture center in Ichikube, and we want to demonstrate all of this, how to live together. I want to call upon the private sector, the government, and everybody that will join us, and we demonstrate how best we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now go into a Q&A session. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to synthesize what Jane has ably been able to tell us, but what I'd like to do in this session, which is the Q&A session, is to invite about 4 questions. The room is full, and I feel really bad having to say just 4, but in the interest of time, okay, let's make it 5. And I'd like to start with a young lady who has sat here very patiently, come a long way in order to be here, and she has a question for Jane. Then after, I'll open it up. Lauren?
Hi, everybody. It's such a privilege to be here and to be able to ask a question to Dr. Goodall. I'm Laura. I come from Spain. I came all the way here to ask you a question about spirituality in the chimpanzees. I'm currently developing a documentary about palmistry on chimps and human hands. It's the reading of the lines of the hand. By doing so, I want to open up a conversation about whereas the barriers between humans and other living beings towards spirituality, holistic way of understanding souls and personalities, destiny and faith. And if you, by your observation and studies, could give us maybe some insights of what you have seen.
Chimpanzees certainly have culture. So in different parts of Africa, there are different ways They use tools, different objects for different purposes, and these different behaviors are passed from one generation to the next through observational learning. That's a definition of culture. So they have culture, but when we come to spirituality, the closest is sometimes at the start of very heavy rain. They do an extraordinary, I call it a rain dance. It's a display and it's very rhythmic. And it goes on, it's like almost like defying the elements. But even more dramatic is what we call the waterfall display. There's waterfalls at Gombe that drop 80 feet. And the rivers are small, they're streams really, and they're shallow. But as you approach along the bottom of the valley, you can hear the roaring of the water as it falls onto the rocky gravel bed. And normally chimpanzees avoid water, they can't swim, they don't like getting their feet wet. There's even talk in one area in Africa where if the ground is very wet, they kind of wrap leaves around their feet like sandals. I don't know if that's true, but it's a researcher who commented on it. But when they, particularly the males, when they approach this waterfall, it's carved for itself a cleft in the rock over thousands of years as it falls down this thick rock. And so there's always a breeze, and the vines at the side of the waterfall are swaying in the breeze because it's as the water displaces the air. And the chimpanzees start this rhythmic, usually upright, swaying from foot to foot, stamping in the water, bending down, throwing big rocks ahead of them. And then at the end, very often if you're in a place to see, they'll sit on a rock and you see their eyes and they're looking up, they're watching the water as it falls, they're watching the water as it goes past them and away. And if they could speak, if they could share what they're feeling, which I can only assume is wonder and awe, what is this that's always coming and always going and always here? And if they could speak, might that not lead to an early animistic religion when people used to worship things they didn't understand, the sun and the stars, the hurricanes, and so on. So this is where the big difference, because chimpanzees are highly intelligent, they could be taught sign language, up to 600, 700 words. Parrots can as well, by the way. But they can't, because they can't speak. They can't discuss together these feelings they have and develop them into anything like a religious, spiritual culture. So that's the big difference. And I forget which speaker talked about us being the most intelligent being on the planet. We may be intellectual, we may be clever, but intelligent creatures don't destroy the planet.
Thank you.
I'd like to start from this side of the room, in the middle, this side, and then one more right at the end there. If we can keep the questions fairly brief, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Dr. Jane Goodall for this moving talk. But my question is, you see these children, they are from school. You have talked to them directly. The problem we have in Uganda now is that there is no institution that talks to children about wildlife conservation. There used to be Wildlife Class of Uganda. Is it still there? Yes. Yeah, it's still there, but limping. Because I was a member of the Wildlife Class of Uganda when I was a secondary school student in 1976. Yes. I've been in conservation for 44 years now. But what dampens my heart is these children, nobody visiting them and giving them conservation education. Dr. Jane Goodall and your institute, is there a way through lecture, is there a way how the institute also embrace wildlife conservation to schools, particularly to schools, both secondary and primary? Is there a way that element can be captured in the Jane Goodall Institute? Thank you very much.
Well, let me answer briefly by saying we have developed a curriculum for schools, and when I had the honor of speaking to the First Lady yesterday, she emphasized that she really was passionate about getting conservation, environmental education into all the schools. So I think that this will be happening.
We must change the world.
Thank you so much. My name is Jarvis Tumwesige. I work with KCCA and the Directorate of Public Health and Environment. My question goes to Dr. Jane. Considering your experience and expertise in environmental conservation and life conservation, I'd like to, I am kindly intrigued to learn your perspective on the concept of One Health and how can help us to live harmoniously between the environment and the humans, including what.
So that's on One Health. One Health.
The question was based on One Health. One Health, yes. Well, this is something we're working on. And, you know, we're learning more and more. Like, we're still suffering from COVID. And COVID was the result of disrespect of animals, because a disease that's a pathogen that a wild animal has come to terms with over hundreds of years perhaps, and is immune to it. But if one pathogen from one animal can bond with a cell in one human, that can lead to a new zoonotic disease like COVID. And scientists have warned that if we continue to disrespect wild animals and traffic them around the world, as we do for pets, for entertainment, for food, for clothing, for goodness knows what, then we will get more and worse pandemics. So think what COVID did to our societies around the world. It caused so much loss of jobs, loss of life, disruption of social services. We don't want more. We must start respecting animals. We must stop treating them as mere things, mere objects that we can do what we like with. They were not put on this planet, nor were we, to be disregarded, disrespected. Each one has a life that is precious. Each one is a conscious being. And so this One Health, we need to understand that our health depends on the health of the environment. The health of the environment is increasingly dependent upon our efforts to protect it.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take a was that a question from this young lady here? Just here? No, she was just clapping. Okay. Can I have a question from the lady there, please?
Thank you. My name's Danny. Thank you, Jane, for coming. When I hear your story, I think of one of my favorite quotes from a writer called Annie Dillard. She says, instructions for living a life are 1, pay attention, 2, be astonished, and 3, tell about it. And it's just so much your story. And I also think about the kids and a lot of environmental education and how a lot of it starts with our world is in trouble and we need you to save it. And I think I'm mostly a mother, and I love also hearing so much about the story of your mother and how much of an impact she had on you. And the question I have is, how do we nurture this connection, this sense of awe and wonder, and a love for the world in our children and in each other before telling them it's in trouble?
Okay.
So,
well,
yeah, and second, like, how do you care for yourself? I think those are connected. Like, how do you care for yourself as an
yep,
activist?
I get it.
Yeah.
So basically, the sad thing is today that more and more people are dissociating themselves from nature. They're living in a bubble of virtual reality. They're learning about nature, if they learn at all, only from television or social media. And so one of the things we want to do, especially for Roots and Shoots, is get them out into the environment. And watching some child who's never had a chance of paddling in a stream, looking at the tadpoles and frogs, seeing the expression of wonder. I've seen it also in the eyes of a little boy who was growing a daffodil bulb, and then he got sick, and when he left the school, the bud was just a little bud. When he came back, there was this beautiful flower, and a picture of him looking at that flower with the wonder and awe in his eyes. So the answer to your question, get children into nature, and that bond, with that feeling of awe will automatically come. And it's the same with adults. We need to experience nature, like living for a week, as you said, James, out in some forest, and learning how the animals live, and listening to the birds, learning to be quiet, learning to be quiet.
Thank you very much. There's a lady on the table here at the front, please. Have we reached 5 yet? I'm not sure I'm counting properly. But there's a lady here, another lady there. I'm not being biased or anything. If you could please make that quick. And there's another lady at the back there from Vienna, I think, Vienna School. So I think that would be a really good one, because this directly refers to you, young shoots. First, we'll have the lady at the front, please.
Come and use this one. Why don't the other questioners line up in the front to save time? Because they're right at the back, so why don't you come up ready for your question?
Come to the front. The ones that we've identified.
Hello, thank you. Yes, where's the student? We'll start with the student from Vienna. Just a moment. Please stand on the side. We'll take one, please come forward.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Banice. I'm the guild president of Vienna College Namugongo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra Muganzi, and we just have 2 short questions. So recently in biology, we've been learning about mutations, especially like gene mutations. And an example of one I can say creates albinism in humans. And then we just found out recently that there's also albinism in chimpanzees. So we wanted to know if that, like, if you've come across any, and if there's like a difference in their behavior.
there are such things as albino chimpanzees, but they're not like human albinos. And I've never seen one. There was an albino gorilla, and the problem is that their eyes are affected by the sun. They tend to go blind. But there's only been one albino gorilla. He went to the Barcelona Zoo. Unfortunately, they kept him outside in the sun, and he went completely blind. How the other chimps would react to an albino, there have been 3 around Gombe. I've never seen them. They seem to be part of the group, and they did not have the albino eyes. Their eyes were normal.
There's a young lady with a striped dress.
Sorry, this is the final question we're having for Dr. Goodall. And then we'll take the other questions and we'll find a way of relaying them.
Thank you so much. I'm called Auma Nwandera, Member of Parliament, representing Busia District, and I'm the youngest Member of Parliament in the 11th Parliament. In Parliament, I sit on the Committee of Climate Change, and I'm a member of Parliamentary Forum on Tourism, and I also do advocate tourism in Uganda. When I got this invite, I was so excited to be here. Reason, when I read what I asked on, I kept on wondering why only chimpanzees? Yet we have different animals in this world. So that's my question. What are the animals that are being killed every day? Why can't we also protect other animals? And finally, I come from Busia District. I border Kenya. We have Mabira Forest. We have a lot of chimpanzees, but actually the community, they keep on killing these chimpanzees. They don't have every them, and I always get these reports from my voters. So that was my question. Why can't we also involve to protect other animals? Because I love tourism a lot, and a country like Uganda, we have a lot of things that we can visit and tour in Uganda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let me pass it over to Jane.
Your question is the fact is we try to protect all animals. Chimpanzees are what is known as an umbrella species, like gorillas. If you protect the forest for chimpanzees, you protect the forest for all the animals in the forest. We don't only care about chimpanzees. I've studied hyenas, I've studied warthogs, not long like the chimps, but I've spent time with them. I love dogs, I love pigs, I love cows. I'm trying to protect the universe of animals, but I'm also trying to make the universe better for young children growing up. And these people who didn't have their questions answered, if you write them out and you give them to the Jane Goodall Institute, then I promise I will ask. Any questions that you have, I will answer them and give the answers to you, James. And I know you're going to end now, so may I do one more thing? Okay, so up here on the stage, we have Anna Rathman, and she comes from the Jane Goodall Institute, USA. She's the executive director. But we also have Diana. Diana, come, I want you up here too. And Diana's the ED from the Jane Goodall Institute of Austria. And we need her up here to be, I couldn't do what I do without these people. And I want you, Alice, up here as well, because she's the director of Africa programs and should be up here. And now I want Peter and James up here. And I don't know if we have the director of Roots and Shoots in this room, but if we do, you as well, and any other staff of the Jane Goodall Institute Uganda, because this is the team, part of the team, that's changing the world. This is the team that's working with Roots and Shoots. And I hope that when I go, there will be lots of questions for you, because I felt sorry for you sitting there while everybody asked questions. We have Mr. Roots and Shoots. Mr. Roots and Shoots. A round of applause for him. Oh, look at them all. They're all coming. Look, here we are. Jane Goodall Institute, Uganda. Oh, there's not much room for me anymore. Down. Yeah, no, now we get a photo. Jane Goodall Institute, Uganda. Wonderful people.
Clearly, this is also a photo moment, so maybe we won't do it again, but so we're taking pictures. This is really ideal. We would like to invite the young dancers because we would like this session to end on a happy note with you giving Dr. Jane a dance that you have made up. Hello? Yes, are you ready to come? Well, come here at the front, and then we will end the session, and the questions the questions will be written out and sent to the Institute, but for now, we will end this particular session before we go into the panel discussion with our two panelists. Yes? Is that all right? Yeah.
Jerusalema ikayalami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana Jerusalema ikayalami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana dawo yami ayikolana buso wami awukolana ilondoloze zuhambe nami dawo yami ayikolana buso wami awukolana ilondoloze dawo yami ayikolana buso wami awukolana ilondoloze zuhambe nami dawo yami ayikolana buso wami awukolana ilondoloze
chosen generation, we've been called for to show His excellence. Hey, all I require for life, God has given me, and I know who I am. We are a chosen generation, we've been called for to show His excellence. All I require for life, God has given me, for I know who I am. I know who God says I am, what He says I generation. We've been called for to show His excellence. Yeah, all I require for life, God has given me, and I know who I am. We are a chosen generation. We've been called for to show His excellence. All I require for life, God has given me. I know who God says I am, what He says I am, where He says I'm at. I know who I am. I know who God says I am, what He says I am, where He says I'm at. I know who I am. I'm walking in power. I walk in miracles. I live a life of life. For I know who I am. Say, I'm walking in power. I walk in miracles. I live a life of favor. For I know who I am. Everybody shout
Great. St. Teresa Primary School. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes. Good. Yeah, so we will be entering into the next session as Dr. Google.
Can the young ones there with their pictures, can you come and show them here at the front? Not everybody was able to see them. There you go. Yes. And turn around and show it to the rest of the audience as well. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll have a short health break, very short, as we get into the panel discussions. And Jane will leave the floor here, but we're going to get to the panel discussion in a few minutes. Thank you.
All right, we're diving right into the panelist session, and we'll have a discussion. Over to you, moderator. Thank you.
Clearly, there's not a health break. So we're diving straight into the discussion. And with me, and I correct myself, I'm really, really sorry. I think it was the excitement. I called you Jane instead of Joan. Joan Else. And we have Honorable Flavia at the end there. And basically what this discussion is, before we also open it up for further questions, is really reflecting on the topic, the partnership for coexistence. I think in many ways, the conversation, the way in which it was structured by Dr. Jane, is not just about chimpanzees, but it's about sustainable development, people-centered development, and the need to actually recognize that and be able to find actionable solutions. So my question, first on my far left here, to my Honorable Flavia, is what challenges do you, as a Member of Parliament, see in terms of the idea of sustainable development, and specifically the way in which it has been positioned as being versus the environment? It seems as if the way in which it's often spoken about, it's a winner takes all. It's either you have sustainable development or the environment. How do you look at it?
I thank you very much, and I would like to welcome Jane Goodall to Uganda again, and I would like to congratulate Ngamba Islands upon their 25th year when they are conserving the chimpanzees, of course, almost as a sanctuary. And as a member of parliament and a passionate conservationist by nurturing, I see a lot of challenges as a member of parliament and as a decision maker and as a person who is concerned with the appropriation of budgets. But I want to tell this to everyone, that sustainable development comes with conservation responsibility, because one of the sustainable development goals is about sustainable production, sustainable productivity. So we can only do everything but sustainably, so that we live together with this environment in order for us to hold a future of continuous developments and continuous, a continuous future for us all. And as a member of parliament, I see 1, 2, or 3 things. One, the number of chimpanzees we are talking about may not necessarily be the one. So we want an authentic census of the chimpanzees, because there are chimpanzees in protected areas, there are chimpanzees outside the protected areas, and those are never counted. And yet they also love and live in the same habitat with these that are in protected areas. And therefore, we would love that the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities and the Wildlife Research Institute to get us the correct census of the chimpanzees, and also how much forest do we need to sustain these chimpanzees. So data there becomes an issue for us as policymakers. And then secondly, political interferences. Because if our communities want to do agriculture and to increase production and go commercial and do all this infrastructure, we need to guide them. We have the influence to sensitize, to do mindset change, to ensure that the people are not doing their production just for the sake of doing production. And so, as members of parliament, we get a lot of pressure from fellow MPs asking for degazettement after degazettement, telling you, but the trees were already cut, so we can as well degazette. It is not only the trees we are looking at biodiversity. Not only the trees, there is a lot that lives in the forest, that you cannot look at trees and think that the government is only protecting trees. So we get a lot of pressure, and of course, financing. Forest recovery financing has become a critical problem that the government of Uganda needs to up the game on this forest recovery financing. The budgets are so little that the speed at which we want forest recovered is so low. And so, being that our economy is private sector led, we would like to call on the private sector to invest in forest recovery, as government also tries to up their budgets so that we can get these forests recovered. But the reports we get as parliament from, for example, the Uganda Forest Reference Level of 2019 indicate that the forest cover has decreased by 37% in the last 20 years. So I don't know by Vision 2040 whether we shall not have no forests anymore. And I wonder whether we shall be working to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so these are the challenges as members of parliament, and more so the Committee on Natural Resources and the Committee on Climate Change that we are dealing with from both the politicians who are members of parliament, from government, from the communities that always want to take things for granted and never want to relate that their livelihood depends on the livelihood of the other ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that submission. I'd like to pose exactly the same question to my panelist who's right here on my left-hand side. I've known Joan for a long time. I didn't realize she was a passionate conservationist. And listening to her at the table talking about what tree? A tree, Omondi? Yes, that tree and the bar cloth, I was really fascinated. But I'd like to hear your take on it as somebody who's in the private sector and who obviously practices conservation.
Thank you so much, Susan. For the few people who have remained behind, thank you so much. It energizes us to know that at least some people have left, but a few have remained behind. Thank you so much, Honorable Time and the OWEC, and of course, my ED of OWA. And yes, however, my story is going to be very, very personalized because I grew up in the West. You've heard Honorable Time telling you that he's a member of parliament in Kyenjojo. I cannot say that I was privileged that I was traveling from Fort Portal to Kampala all the time. I can even count, I think it must have been about twice that I traveled from Fort Portal to Kampala at an age that, because I never knew my age at that time, it wasn't necessary. We were not celebrating birthdays, so I didn't know what age I was, but I knew that when passing, to know that you're about to reach Kyenjojo, it would be so thick with mist and you could easily not even see any car ahead of you. So it was, and at that time, I hated it because I was coming from Fort Portal, going to my grandparents, but then I reached that stage where I cannot see anything. So I thought, what on earth is going on here? However, I grew up and went to Nairobi, and then I saw Wangari Maathai just fighting on forest, almost putting her life to death because of cutting a tree. So at that particular time, or a few years after that, we traveled I had a family, and we traveled to come back home, and I was with my children in the car, and my little niece, a child of my cousin. And so my children, because of Wangari Maathai, had this of do not cut trees, because you're spoiling the forest and all this thing. And then they said, oh, this is so bad. Why are they cutting trees? Why don't they just conserve trees? Don't they ever understand anything? Behold, my small niece challenged them, said, do you realize if they don't cut trees, we will not have firewood? So it's because of the livelihood that they're cutting trees. That story ended there. But as an adult, I could not intervene. I could neither side with my children who were saying the right thing, nor could I side with my niece who was giving them facts on the ground. And those are the facts on the ground that we need to relate to, that we need to see. What are the facts on the ground? Why do people do what they do, and yet other people see it that distracting? Okay, so can we find that thread? Can we find that harmony to be able to live together and to be able to see that, yes, the sustainability that we're talking about, the development that we all want, can we have it, but can we have it in harmony that we can be able to understand and be able to develop each other? What have I done, Joan? My name is Joan Cantor-Els. I'm a managing director for a very, very long time in Let's Go Travel. However, when everybody was planting eucalyptus. I happen to have had land, about 100 acres, back in Fort Portal. And I don't know why my head didn't go to eucalyptus until I went to a fashion show. And that fashion show, when the fashion show finished, the whole fashion show was in back clothes. And these girls were young girls. You know how young girls can turn anything into such a beauty. So that was what was happening. So at the end, the person said, this tree is being extinct. Nobody's caring about the Ficus natalensis. In Rutoro, we call it Omtoma. Abaganda bagweta Motoma, but we add on also to make it Omtoma. But the scientific name is Ficus natalensis. From there, I said, I'm going to grow Ficus natalensis. And that was about 6 to 7 years ago. I went, I had land. I went to Masaka, I was trained, I came up with the seedlings, I took the guys there. The long story is that today I'm harvesting back cloth from my garden. The own tree I have planted myself. And what a pride it is to see that you can actually grow a tree, get the fringe benefits or harvest it, but the tree still lives. And that tree will live for more than 100 years. I'm enjoying today the backcloth and all the pride. Last time I did fascinators and I went with them to Belgrade, and everybody thought that was something from heaven. However, anything that we can put into the soil and nurture it, this is a personal thing. Put it in the soil, nurture it, and then see the fringe benefit of it. I hope that is enough. Otherwise, if you don't stop me, I'll go on.
I actually wouldn't mind if you went on, because personal stories, listening to Dr. Goodall and now listening to you, I think are the most impactful, is when you actually hear somebody who's walked that journey, who's decided intentionally to work with the environment, that it actually affects you and the way you're thinking. What you submitted to start off with in terms of the responsibilities and the need to acknowledge that there's responsibility that goes with the whole idea of sustainable development. I completely understand, but the question here is, of course, as you put it very clearly, that not only is a full census needed for the chimpanzees, or not in outside of the reservation places, but also in terms of speaking to the political landscape and changing the political landscape where there won't be the level of interference, especially when it comes to degazetting, which has become quite popular. You said that 37%. Actually, if we keep going as we're going, by the time we end this particular millennium, we will not have any forests left. So I think the problem is quite dire. Outline the challenges. My next question, and the next question that will also go to other panelists before we open it up, is the challenges are there. The challenges, do you do subsistence farming? Do you encourage people to be able to live off the land? Do you conserve the land? What is the balance? How do you maintain that balance in order to be able to conserve the environment at the same time as being able to look after people's livelihoods? I think that in addition to that, having identified the challenges, it's always easy to do that. What is action? What is actionable? What can one do? Yes, of course, there's education. We've heard about that, starting schools and starting young and having people like these young kids here being able to understand. What else can one do at this particular point in time?
The Parliament of Uganda enacted a law to establish the Uganda Wildlife Conservation Education Center, and it is doing a great job connecting children to nature, being animal keepers for a day, a week, a month. So the parents here and those that are watching us have the privilege of using the holiday to take their children to connect with nature. And they are doing a great job, although the financing is small, that they would be doing it through the whole country, but they try to do sensitization, awareness, and they are working with schools around Entebbe and those that are beyond Entebbe. Actually, the Uganda Wildlife Conservation Education Center, before COVID, was taking animals to the cultural activities. Karamoja cultural activity, the Mpango, because Elsie is my minister for tourism in Toro Kingdom. So at the celebration of the coronations, animals would be taken so that people identify with their totems, and then the culture is charged to loving and not hurting the animals which are their totems. And Buganda Cultural Kingdom activities would take these animals as well. And for me, that was a right direction for us to make sensitizations, make people love their totems, animals which are their totems. Secondly, we want to appreciate that culture was doing a great job in maintaining heritage for posterity. But when we changed the land tenure system and we went into fragmentation, land fragmentation, so people now individualize the development and they don't care what the neighbor does, whether the neighbor should leave, and they are living in that kind of situation. If we had maintained communal land, if we had maintained cultural land and clan land, I think people there were accountable to each other in terms of their heritage. We could use our cultural institutions to go back to such settings. And so, of course, reforestation and afforestation needs, I think we need a business case, because the Ministry of Finance only listens to figures. What is the cost that we are going to take if we don't do anything about reforestation and afforestation, so that the Ministry of Finance can know how much they spend in mitigating and trying to compensate and sort issues when chimpanzees come to people's homes, pick their babies, and go away with them. So the Ministry of Finance must be told the cost of not doing, so that they can know whether it is okay for them to spend in compensations or to mitigate now and spend on forestation and reforestation. Of course, documenting experiences is very good, because that is when we get learnings, that is when we can share knowledge on conservation in Uganda, and also evaluate the impact and having a mind about conservation. I would like to implore the Ministry of Tourism and Uganda Wildlife Authority to operationalize the Uganda Wildlife Authority Act that we passed in 2018. Because without operationalizing it with instrument and regulations, then we just made a paperwork which will never be implemented. So can they fast track the operationalization of laws? And of course, we should take conservation and environmental management not only as a cross-cutting issue. It should now get a certificate of non-compliance. If any of the sectors does not comply to conservation, they should not even be given a budget. Let us get it from the cross-cutting issues and make it a main issue where no budget is given unless they are conservation compliant. So that comes with a policy, and the policy makers are here with us, beginning with the Minister of Tourism. Let's get a policy on that, financial implications on whether each sector cannot finance conservation. And of course, institutional partnerships are very good. Our partners, I thank you very much. Jane Goodall Institute, UWEC, the Ministry of Tourism itself, we have WWF, AWF, WCS, all those have been partnering in this. But they are loners, they are scattered. We need a collaboration. We need the same message. We need to work together. We need to know the roadmap. What are we doing next? But because some of the interventions have been projectivized, they are not sustainable. because everything is done as a project, and then when the project is over, everybody walks away, and then we are looking around. Let us collaborate so that even if a certain partner is walking out, they leave their roadmap and their priorities to the partners remaining, so that we continue and sustain this drive.
Well, I did ask the question, didn't I? I mean, thank you very much. It's very comprehensive. I think the idea of being able to connect the dots, as it were, in ensuring that not only is the Ministry of Finance and the other ministries aware that a relationship between conservation and probably loss of income as a result in the long run is really important. The issue of stopping fragmentation by having a collaboration amongst all the different partners. They're partners, but all of them are not working in conjunction with one another. So it makes it very difficult maybe to see an intentional sort of activities towards the conservation, as well as ensuring that sensitization takes place in different places and spaces, and especially amongst the young. I want to go back, I'm sorry, the same question sort of to Joan. But having listened to your personal story, I think that one of the things that struck me about it is the memories that one has as a child. I personally have the same sort of memories about Mabira Forest. Driving on Ginger Road where it was thick, and you would imagine that terrible things are going to happen to you because you could virtually not see. Fast forward 40 years later, not only can you drive with a very clear vision, there's nothing going on. There are no chimpanzees, there are no animals coming to greet you. So that level of change, and being in the industry you're in yourself, how do you see a solution being arrived at? We've already heard the parliamentary approach to ensure that the 2018 Act is implemented and actualized. But in terms of your own work, especially around tourism and so forth, what would you suggest as an actionable solution and things that one can start almost immediately working with?
Susan, there's no really one fits them all. Personally, I feel anything to do with tourism starts on a personal level. You've got to love tourism in order to do it. You've got to love conservation. You've got to like something in order to do something good out of it. Without that love, so where does that lead me on? Can we do a mindset change kind of programs so that tomorrow, you know, if you ever go somewhere and you find people crying, you'll all turn into tears and cry. But if you go somewhere and you find people laughing, you will all laugh. Okay? You know, so this is the kind of thing that I'm saying, and we can think of starting big, but the little thing that you do. When I was growing up, they used to tell me that the little thing you do unminded proves your way. Okay, so this is each of us individually. If you start doing something, you have no idea what impact it will have on your neighbor. That is what I'm thinking of at this time. Thank you.
Thank you both very much, and I'm going to end because I'm mining you, and I feel really bad. But just as I end, I'd like one question, and both of you are free to answer it before I open it up. There's a sense that there is local knowledge about the environment, and that local knowledge has sort of been thrown away with the wind. And the idea that, for example, I remember this phrase over and over again, that a river never forgets where it went in the first place. Yeah. And I remember thinking that was weird, only to discover that of late, when you see floods and you see rivers breaking their banks, it is because they're trying to find their way back to where they were before. But some of this local knowledge has sort of got lost in translation, partly, but also partly because of the idea that it is not, I don't know, it is not civilized to talk about the environment in this way. Where can we place local knowledge, local environmental knowledge? Where do we place it in both of your solutions?
Again, the Parliament of Uganda enacted a law to allow cultural institutions to operate in this country. And I think the spirit of government was to ensure that cultural institutions take us back to the roots, the way the young children were saying. And if cultural institutions would take up this awareness, harness these local solutions because they had them anyway, cherish their heritage, and link it to their followers, I think that would take us a very long way towards getting solutions to this heritage that is getting away. If each cultural institution would support and facilitate a museum from which we can connect to the past and be able to link with what we are now and go back to what was supporting our heritage, I think this would take us a long way. And possibly, secondly, to connect to the clans. Every cultural institutions have their clans. And predominantly, most of the clans have totems, which are animals. And animals' habitats are the forests. And so if everybody, every young person, every one of us would be taken back to where your totem lives and you are able to support its habitat, I think those kind of local solutions would assist us. So I take the local solutions back to the cultural institutions because each culture had their local solutions. So can we harness them for both social dividends and economic dividends?
I say it very, very simple. We all have radios. Even my grandmother, she used to know how to listen to Ebirango. So, and that is one thing that has not gone out of fashion. Please, let's put these programs on the radios, on the local radios, so that everybody can be able to hear them. For the young ones, let's go social media. They should also be able to pick it so that both worlds are attention is paid to detail. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, when Jane Goodall was telling us about her story, here in Africa, women don't link very well with wildlife. We are timid. We fear forests. She already told you. We fear the forests. We fear wild animals. We fear animals generally. And so when Jane Goodall gives us her story, that means the Jane Goodall Institute needs to support the women in conservation. Please, can you have a women in conservation chapter so that we can take on what Jane Goodall is doing? I thank you very much. I wish you very well.
Last shot.
Yes, one last shot. Please go home and go home and grow 5 trees. Just 5 trees, each of us. Just 5 trees. I know how expensive it is to grow a tree. So please go home and do it. And thank you.
Can I have a louder applause?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just quickly summarize these last 2 things. And the reason I'm doing that, the idea of economic and social dividend being really important, going back to the cultural institutions and making sure that they're also equally involved. But more important also this idea of having women chapters to also be able to support women conservationists. And finally, the idea of planting a tree. I believe that even if you don't plant 5 trees, the idea that you can go out and plant 1 tree is in itself an action. Recently, we completed our leadership training at the Julius Nyerere Leadership Center. And with that, it was 100 students, guild leaders from different universities in Uganda. And each one went away. Normally, you know, that you get a little envelope, and I'm sure they were all expecting a little envelope, and they all went away with a tree. We gave them a tree so that they could plant it, and they could send us a video of them planting it, and we could share it on our website. I'm really happy to say that 50% of those who went away with the tree have planted it and have sent us a video of them planting it. So the idea of planting is really, really key. And definitely the idea of having as many institutions, especially the cultural institutions, that still have quite a hold on all of us involved, is definitely something that will chart a way forward. I thank you all very much for having listened, and now I open it up for 5 questions. Only.
Yes, we'll take 5 questions quickly, because in the interest of time, we'd really want to wind this up. Any questions? Yes, please, we've got a question that way. Question number 2. There's a second question here.
Hello everyone, my name is Regan Okia. I'm in my final SEM, doing environmental sciences. My question is to John. I'm inquiring about the market for the backcloth you're making, because I see this as a good strategy for sustainable agroforestry, which can be adopted by most of the NGOs in environmental conservation. So that's my first question. The second conservation, no, please one. Please. Can I leave it to you? It's this one, like what are they doing to attract the private sector to conservation?
Thank you. John?
Anytime you get my contact, I'll be able to buy every single backcloth from you, personally, at a very good price.
That's how big the market is. So there's immense market. Please, Senior.
Again, I'm Otakat John Emily, Honorary Wildlife Officer and a veteran in wildlife conservation. My question goes to Flavia, Honorable Flavia Kabahenda. We normally, as conservationists, some of the biggest problems we face is encroachment, particularly in the areas, mountainous areas, Mount Elgon and other areas. And normally that's brought because of the pronouncements made by politicians, members of parliament, especially during the times when there is electioneering. Is there a way, as a member of parliament, and I know you as a very enthusiastic, very vibrant conservationist in parliament, is there a way you can, I don't know, make a law or whatever that should prevent your colleagues? I don't know what should be made. Even a policy, you are talking about policies to prevent your colleagues from making reckless statements that will make trouble for the protected areas. As we talk now, Mount Elgon National Park, there's a lot of problem because politicians are making reckless problems. Is there a way you can, or even conduct a serious seminar or get something that will reprimand your colleagues from making reckless statements? Thank you.
I already alluded to the fact that political statements are getting us bad, because a lot of applications by members of parliament, from members of parliament on degazettements is killing us. And I think recently you saw how the Elgon community was behaving because the politicians were behind them. you see it everywhere. And I want to tell the management of the Uganda Wildlife Conservation Education that Parliament are your candidates for training. So as you conduct education, know that even Parliament are candidates for your conservation education. You would rather begin with us so that we make better policies, so that we make better legal frameworks, and we support this conservation. And one of them, which I'm pushing to the members of Parliament, is ensuring that conservation and environment management is not a cross-cutting issue, because that is a cheap chair to sit it, but we develop a certificate of conservation compliance for every sector, because no sector does not manage an environment in their institutions. So let us build on that, but UWEC, if you can promise me that you will come to Parliament for education, I will support that.
Thank you. Thank you. I will, in the interest of time, I think those two questions, I really thank the panelists and I thank the guests for coming here today. Moderator, I am one who likes fairness. UWEC has been mentioned twice. Uganda Wildlife Authority was cited on the grounds of policy. We will be concluding now. UWEC is a partner, and as they come up, I invite the minister to come up for a photo moment as we conclude. We will invite you all to lunch in an orderly fashion, but I will guide you. We'll allow the minister to go out after the photo moment, and then we'll invite you all to come and join us. I also invite the Executive Director UWEC, Executive Director UWA, the Chairman Board, Executive Director CT, and the WCS to please come up on the stage to take a picture with the panelists. But we thank you all, and one more hand clap for our fantastic panelists. Just a photo moment with the panelists, and we conclude this event. The EDs, Vice President Africa Programs, please. UBF. Ivan, UBF, for a representative. As we're taking the pictures, we really want to extend our thanks to Sheraton Hotel Kampala, who have given us huge donations to see that this is possible. Thank you, Sheraton. A hand clap, please, for Sheraton Hotel. Chimpanzee. Thank you. We'll allow the Honorable Minister to step out calmly, and I'll be inviting you. Thank you for coming. As the minister steps out, for us who are here waiting, we'll be ushering you for lunch, but I invite St. Teresa Primary School to come on stage and give us a display as the rest of the guests leave. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, John. Thank you, Honorable. Much appreciated. St. Teresa, please come and give us a display as the rest of the team waits. Ladies and gentlemen, as we wait, I once again want to recognize our partners, the Ministry of Water and Environment, Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, Uganda Wildlife Authority, Uganda Wildlife Education Center, Uganda Biodiversity Fund, the National Forestry Authority, Wildlife Clubs of Uganda, the Uganda Tourism Board, and like I mentioned, Sheraton Hotel, who have sponsored us, gave us this room for free. So we're really excited and thankful to Sheraton Hotel for that level of support. Already an indication that private sector is really interested in supporting conservation and environmental efforts through corporate social responsibility. So, thank you. Don't go without eating. We have lots and lots of food for you. So please grab a plate on your way out. You'll be ushered. We have ushers there. Please grab something to eat. The food is yours, but we thank you for coming.